David Benavidez does not like this guy, and David Morell does not like that he doesn't have David Benavidez's spot. But we're going to go deeper in the conversation because this fight reminds me of a fight that went on a couple of nearly 2 decades ago. This fight featured a very large heavyweight champion who had great boxing skills and a magnificent teacher as a trainer. But lo and behold, the opposition wasn't also a big heavyweight puncher, but he was a southpaw and he was a club fighter. When you look at the skills, the first thing that you think of is the best skills in boxing win. But for those of us who have been in the gyms for decades on end, know that skills has absolutely nothing to do with it when it comes down to styles, because that's what makes a fight. And when you put a southpaw that can punch up against anybody, no, it does not matter the skill set. Floyd Mayweather is going down as one of the greatest defensive fighters in history. And when he got in the ring with Zav Judah, he but lost every round up to the fourth round, right? So that confirms my point. Skills does not always pay bills. Now that they pay off, but when a guy can punch you and he's in an awkward stance and you see this guy and he's bringing you smoke, you got to remember one thing when you're talking about this boxing. All it takes is one punch that you don't see from an awkward angle, and you don't get repetitions with guys who can fight at that level that are southpaws with power, that have absolutely nothing to lose. And Corey Sanders, when he fought Vladimir Klitschko, had absolutely nothing to lose. And what did he do? He went in there and he showed that this guy doesn't have a chin, and he bust him up and was out of there in 2 rounds. So you tell me, do you think Vegas got it right that night? I'm going to tell you for sure. No, they didn't. Because one thing that you got to realize about boxing, everybody from the great Teddy Atlas to the other people who come on board who just spew their idealizations, their little perceptions and their hypotheses about this fight game, but no one knows more about that fight than the trainer who's in that corner telling the fighter anything he needs to hear in order to win that fight. And that's what you see a lot of times. The trainer just wants to keep a job. So he's acting more like a promoter than an actual trainer. See, this is where we go into the individualism of developing your life and your career in the training field or as a fighter, so that if one piece is removed, you don't even miss that bus. And I always make it clear, I have always been in control of my brand. I was never in fear of a fighter saying bye. I never had to. For one, I was under the tutelage for such a long time, but then when I pulled myself out, I realized I was my own brand. So even great coaches reached out for me to come because they know I wasn't in control by a fighter. You can't get calls as a trainer to come to do camps because most trainers are tied to a fighter. And why? Because the fighter who's finally made it to the back and kind of pay the trainer, and the trainer relies on it. So therefore, he bites his tongue at times. And it's just like when you talk about college football. You see, in college football, the coach is the king. Okay? You work for the coach. But In pro football, the players make more than the coach. So they're the boss. And that's one of the main reasons I tell all of the amateur coaches, you got to remember one thing. You're funding everything as an amateur coach. But when you go with that fighter to the pro ranks, if he takes you, he's your boss. All of that turns around, and everything you say to him as an amateur, they remember. And everything you do as an amateur, they remember. And there's a more likelihood that that fighter is going to fire you anyway. So you got to think about building your brand. So when I think about these fighters, the coaches will tell you whatever you want to hear. They'll tell the reporters whatever they need to hear from that trainer. And I tell people all the time, I can tell you when a trainer's about to lose his job, when it's coming. I mean, even at the precipice of his height and career. I said it last year. I did a whole video and it's still online. And I said that Coach DJ, Coach James, had all of those stablemates, all of those fighters. And I said, once that third piece came, I said, now what's going to happen is when one loses and it's coming, it's going to be a domino effect. I was saying it, and I like to do it online. And no knock on Coach James. He's very super coach of the multiple times. But the game plays and operates a certain way. And just remember, when I'm talking about this fight in the back in the days with Corey Sanders versus Klitschko, that mirrors this fight that's coming up this weekend. Now, I'm not saying David Benavidez is going to get clipped by this guy, but skills did not necessarily pay the bills. Everyone talks that talk before the fight. The trainers, they talk that talk before the fight. But the thing that I always like to point to is the shit that nobody's talking about, right? That's why I'm on an entirely different conversation when you come to my channel. When we're talking about the boxing game, I'm talking about the game in its entirety, and everybody else is talking about specs of it. But what I'm talking about is the actual sport of boxing, and that's a 360-degree circumference. It's business, it's politics, and it's actual livelihood, the way you live your lifestyle. So do you surround yourself with people that are here because they got a chance to get with you and